Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is my wonderful Period 2 Honors Bio class. Say hi.
Hi.
All right, and we're going to pick up where we left off. And we are in the middle of discussing this is actually could be a trihybrid cross. You're looking at 3 different genes in this case. And when you have a problem like this, you don't want to have a ginormous 64 square Punnett square. Okay, so the way you do that is through the product law. And you have individual Punnets. So you cross just your A's. Wait, is that right? Yes. Okay, and then I need to cross just my B's. What are my B's? What is my B? Big B, little b, big B, big B. Sorry, that B's having trouble. And then just your R's. Okay, then I could ask any question about any of these. So in this case, I want to know, what about this particular genotype here? So big A, how often does that happen? 1/4. Big B, little b, how often does that happen? 1/2. And little r, how often? 1/2. So I'm going to say 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 4 is 8 times 2 is 16. 1 out of 16. Oh, Emma got it though. All right, tell your bio buddy, do you get that? Okay, one more practice. Get 100% on this one. Do me a favor on this next one. Don't say a word about anything. Okay, don't say a word about your answer. Don't ask your bio buddy. See if you can do it all by your onesie. Completely by your onesie. Not a word. Don't ask a question. Did you all see these? Don't say a word. Don't ask me a question out loud. Just give me your answer. Give me a nod if you know what I was doing here. Should everybody be done by now? Yeah, they should. Should everyone be done by now? Yeah. How about now? Yeah, no. People, what is the answer to this one?
Nope.
0. 0. Okay. Emma is on fire. Because of her cute hair. All right, now, why is it 0?
You can't have a big off.
Yeah, you can't have any offspring that is this when these are your parents. Okay, this one could give the big R, but this one only has little r's to give, so not the daddy. All right, let's get caught up in your notes. I think do we need to play catch up?
Yeah.
Okay, so find out. Do it now. Where did we leave off?
Law of independent assortment.
Okay, law of independent assortment. Okay, so underneath law of independent assortment, you're thinking about metaphase 1. Each homologous pair assorts independently of each other. So all possible combinations of factors can occur in the gametes. So all possible combinations of factors can occur in the gametes. Can occur in the gametes. All right, and you already learned, remember we did the product rule and the summative rule. Product rule, when you're looking at what are all the possibilities of how this could turn out for each individual event, and then you multiply it together. And then summative, if there's more than one way to get the same result, you add it up. And when we see that, that would be, for instance, there's more than one way there's more than one way to get a big R, little r combination. So we would add that up. So there's half, right? Okay. And then number 3, chance has no memory. We talked about that somewhere in here. Chance has no memory. Each offspring has the same probability of inheriting a trait. It is not dependent on the genetics of the offspring before it. So each offspring has the same probability of inheriting a trait. It is not dependent on the genetics of the offspring before it. On the genetics of the offspring before it. Okay, and we also talked about test crosses. Remember we said if we had a brown-eyed person, who would they need to have children with? A blue-eyed person, right? And if they had sex, if a brown-eyed man, and I'm not saying to do this, and please don't think that I think this is okay, but if a brown-eyed man had sex with 10 blue-eyed women, okay? And all the babies are born about the same time, okay? And all 10 babies have brown eyes. What do you think the father was?
Mormon.
What?
Mormon.
Mormon. Oh, that's not offensive. Okay. What would you think the genotype was of his eyes?
Big
Big. But if he had just one blue-eyed child, then probably what? Big, little. Exactly. So a test cross, do you need to test a recessive phenotype? Look at me right now. Do you need to test a recessive phenotype? No. If somebody has blue eyes, I don't need to test them. Okay? I know what their genotype is. What is it? Little b, little b. No test required. Because you are that phenotype. The genotype creates, that's the only way you can get that phenotype is if you're double recessive, right? But if you have brown eyes, I need to test you. Because I don't know if you're brown or you are brown-blue. What do I use to test you? A recessive. And then you look at the offspring. It doesn't do any good for them to have sex with another brown-eyed person. We don't know. We could never prove what that second one is. Unless on the off chance the other brown-eyed person happened to be a heterozygote and they happen to be a heterozygote and 25% of the chance they could make a blue-eyed baby. See what I'm saying? That's not an effective test. You test them with somebody so you can tell from the offspring, the phenotype of the offspring, what the genotype is of the parent. Okay? Purple flowers dominant over white flowers. So I have a purple flowered plant. I don't know if it's purple or what? Purple white. I don't know. So who do I test it with? A white flower. Okay? Could blue tell what would happen depending on the 2 potential genotypes of this purple flower? What would you expect? Go ahead, blue. When it says P dash, what does that mean? It could be what?
Big P or little P.
Big P, or big P, little p. Either one. Okay? So talk about how will that play out? Did they say this?
Yeah.
And this? Yes? Okay? So under test cross, purpose to determine or confirm the genotype of a dominant phenotype. To determine or confirm the genotype of a dominant phenotype. Slate, answer 4B to your bio buddy. And then you can put it in your notes. Answer 4B.
So if it is a midget,
What'd you type in there for your answer?
short.
Why? The short will always give a, the short one will always give a little t. And then we can tell, right, by what the other plant gives. If they turn out to be tall every single time, then we know they're probably tall. But if they're short, then it's the other way around. Here, do this question right here.
I see Kristen Richmond Prescott. Who's that?
She is right there.
Okay, can I borrow you right after?
Do you remember about tasting? Tasting is a what? Dominant or recessive trait?
Recessive.
Dominant.
Oh, no,
Which I
tasting.
have
Yeah.
written up here. Gotta do this. Hundy, yes. Yes. That's two.
We
Another
win.
record. Hey, you're ahead for you. Yeah. Way to go. Set the bar low. Good job, Mia. All right. See if you can get a 3. Go for a 3. Come on now. You got this. I believe in you. Aim for the stars. Oh, hang on. That's the last question. Yay! That's 3. We're masters. All right. Get one more and you're tied for second place.
Tied for student.
Tied for second.
Oh, it is. Oh, I messed that one up.
Oh.
Yeah, no more, guys.
No, it's part of this community.
We kick him out.
You kick him out, we burn him.
I don't know about that one.
Oh, wait, no,
Okay, we are at 3.
A couple people.
It's a big improvement. You tripled your score. Awesome. Okay. Check with your body if they missed. See if they understand why they missed before. Do they understand it now? What would you say to them? If I had missed this one, if I had said C, what would you have told me?
You're banned.
I'm banned. So if one of their if just one of their children was a non-taster, then the parent had to be what? A heterozygote. Okay, they had to be a carrier for that non-tasting gene. All right, there is another set of practice problems in your book. I've told you to do those, and you could have done these as of last class. You could have done these, so maybe some of you did. If you come to the review today and you haven't tried any of the practice problems, you're doing a disservice to yourself. If you're asking me to do them for you, then why? Yeah, you got to know what you know and what you don't know. Okay, if I do them for you, they are there. You don't have a quiz over chapter 23, so this is your opportunity to do what a quiz does, and that is to check your level of understanding. So I would encourage you to do these practice problems and the ones at the end of back of the book. Okay, we then did our dihybrid crosses. So let's 2 trait crosses. we said you do an individual Punnett for each trait. We've done that already. You do an individual Punnett for each trait. And then you multiply the probabilities together. And then there is another set of practice problems with that that you could do as well, that you would have been able to do last class. All right, and then this brings us to pedigrees, not just a dog food, okay? Now, in pedigrees, okay, and stay focused. In a pedigree, what do circles represent?
Purebred, right?
No. Females. Okay, that sounded a little alt-righty. Okay, and what do squares represent? Males. Good. All right. Now, when you talk to somebody, this pedigree is drawn for you. If somebody walked into a room and you were a genetic therapist and they said, I don't have the disease, my wife doesn't have the disease, but we have a child who has the disease. How could this possibly have been inherited? So you would draw this out. You say, okay, the wife doesn't have the disease, dad doesn't have the disease, and the child does have the disease. And they said, how do you think we're inheriting this? I want you to be able to, if somebody tells you that you can predict how you think that disease is inherited. Could it be a dominant trait that they're passing on? Could it be a recessive trait that they're passing on? Tell your bio buddy, what do you think? In this case, is it a dominant trait or a recessive trait, and why do you think that? Go ahead. Would this work if the trait was a dominant trait? No. Okay, so let's do an example of this. If this trait is a dominant trait to get it, that means you have to have, let's say, one big A. At least one big A in order to have this disease, because the colored in one has the disease. Neither parent has the disease. So what are they if they don't have the disease? Okay, I need the focus. What is it? Little a, little a. Good. So that can't work. If two parents have the recessive trait, they can't pass on a dominant trait, because if they had the dominant trait, they would show and it would be filled in. So this would not work for a dominant trait, not this type of inherited pattern. But could it work for a recessive trait? Yes. If to get that trait, it's a recessive disease, then this one right here would be what? Little a, little a. And what would mom and dad be?
Big A, little a.
Heterozygotes. Yeah, exactly. What were the odds that they would have that little girl having that disease?
24%.
Yeah, 1/4 or 25%. See the pun in your head. Yes?
Couldn't one of the parents be little a?
Okay. If one of the parents was little a, then they would also have the disease, and this would be filled in. Right?
Yeah, I was thinking.
Does that make sense to you? All right. So on your notes, and by the way, right now we're talking about autosomes. There are 22 autosomes and one set of sex chromosomes. When we talk about sex-linked diseases, it's going to change it up a little bit. Why is that? To be a girl, what do you have to have? To be a girl, what do you have to have? XX. To be a boy, you are XY. Dominance doesn't make any difference for boys on the 23rd pair. Why? They only have one X. They get what they get. It doesn't matter if it's a dominant trait or a recessive trait. They're going to end up getting it because they only have one X, and the traits on the Y are totally different than the traits on the X. Those are called palindric traits. Things like hairy pinna. I think I've told you where hair comes out the inside of your ears as you age. That's only on the Y chromosome. That's why you don't see women with thatch coming out of their ears. Okay? They don't have to go to the barber to have that cleaned out. Okay? But on women, we have two chances at our X chromosome. So even if one of my parents gives me a bad X, the other parent could give me a good X. Guys get only one X. And think this through. Who do they get that X from? Their mom. Because their dad gave them the Y. So it doesn't matter what disease the dad has on his X, because if it's a little boy, they're only passing on Y, right? So that's going to be a different pedigree. We'll talk about these. These are autosomal traits. These are traits where you have 2 copies of everything. So it's a difference between autosome and sex-linked. So on your notes where it says autosomal patterns of inheritance in a pedigree, autosomes are any chromosome other than a sex chromosome. Any chromosome other than a sex chromosome. So both males and females are affected with equal frequency. Both males and females are affected with equal frequency. In a pedigree, females are circles, males are squares, and the affected individuals are solid colors. Yes?
What was number 1 for 2 trait crosses?
Do individual punnet for each trait.
Thank you.
Okay, okay, good. All right, so let's take a look at this pedigree right here. This is for a recessive disorder. If it is a recessive disease, it can skip generations. Where one family member has it and then nobody has it and then it pops up again later, that can happen. It's also more likely that you are going to see diseases if you marry a relative. Because your relative from your family line, like these cousins just did, okay, your relative from your family line, you have your own bundle of recessive diseases, and if it's in your family, they have the same bundle of recessive diseases, and you can end up, if you bundle, you'll bundle those together, right? You'll pass on those recessive diseases. Historically, this has happened in Europe with royalty. Because for political alliances, royalty would marry other royalty, and it wasn't unusual to marry a relative or a cousin or a second cousin. And so things like hemophilia kept popping up because of, really that's an example of inbreeding. So you can have 2 unaffected parents. So these 2 cousins, okay, when they neither one of them had the disease, they looked perfectly fine, but all of a sudden they go and have kids, and 2/3 of their kids are coming out mutant Ninja Turtles, okay? And the reason is they were unaffected, but they have affected children because they were what for the disease? What would you call that? They were a carrier for it. And the diseases you carry are, your sibling is going to carry those, your parents are going to carry those, so don't mate with them, okay? So for many reasons, okay? So go to autosomal recessive disorders. Number 1, most affected children have unaffected parents. So a lot of times they have unaffected parents. Number 2, heterozygotes can have an unaffected, or heterozygotes have an unaffected phenotype. Heterozygotes have an unaffected phenotype. 2 affected parents will always have affected children. Think that through. 2 affected parents. So if this girl, okay, marries a non-relative, which is good for her family, and he is also affected, so he's little a as well, what can you tell me about all of their children? Yeah, all of them are going to end up getting it because all the parents have to give is what? Little a's. And then some examples of that are Tay-Sachs disease. Tay-Sachs, and it's within our community. There are people within this Oak Park community whose children have passed away due to Tay-Sachs disease, and it is incredibly sad. It is a hereditary disease. You don't have an enzyme, the central nervous system degenerates. You have people that have progressive mental deterioration. Let me tell you, these babies are born perfectly normal. And you're so, that's my little baby. And then things over time start to progress. And you get tested. Oh my gosh, they have Tay-Sachs. There's no way to unring that bell. They will pass away usually by the time they are 4 years of age. There's no fix, no medication for that. They have blindness, paralysis, epileptic seizures, death. Okay, and then usually, like all of these children in these pictures have all passed away. Now, I will tell you, why is it here in this community, this Oak Park community? There is a high amount of people that are Jewish in our community. Is that right? And Tay-Sachs disease is more prevalent amongst Jews of European descent than the average population. So you wonder, why is that? And the Jews that were put in concentration camps in Europe, if you were a carrier for the Tay-Sachs disease, you were actually more resistant to the pathogens in the concentration camps. So the concentration camps, the ones that survived the concentration camps, were oftentimes carriers for Tay-Sachs. So when they came out of that, that whole population, it's like natural selection, had selected people who were carriers. But then when two carriers got together, what were the odds that they would have a child who had it? 1 in 4, 25%. Now, if you actually were homozygous for Tay-Sachs, you would already have passed away by the time you were 4. You never reached an age where you would be an adult that had it. You either didn't have it or you were a what? Carrier. Yes?
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Under this section, number 1, most affected children have unaffected parents, so that would be an example of carrier.
Yes.
Okay, and then the second one is, so for Tay-Sachs disease, you don't know.
Yeah,
can't
you
tell
wouldn't
from testing.
know that you had it when you're a heterozygote. Now, you can go and get tested for it. Currently today, you can go and get tested to see if you're a carrier for Tay-Sachs disease, and if your spouse or partner is as well, you may choose to adopt, because you're thinking a 1 in 4 chance we could have a
Can you tell
child.
when you're pregnant?
Yes, you can tell when you're pregnant too. You can have a test for it. Yes.
Does it only affect one of your chromosomes? Like, do you
Yeah,
definitely
only
pass
one.
it? So you could possibly not pass it?
Yes, you could possibly not pass it because it is recessive. Okay? Yes.
To get tested for something like this, would you have to get tested for it specifically, or is there like a
Yes,
test
you would get
that-
tested for it specifically. Yeah, and that's going to be a huge business. You want to get into business, I've told you, water is always going to be critical, right? Water, that's going to be a huge deal. But things like genetic testing and those types of things, huge. You already see commercials now, 23andMe, right? You can go get your chromosomes tested to see where you can come from. It's going to happen more and more. People are going to make out with somebody, and then they're going to go and get a swab on their lips and go get that person tested and go, I don't think I'll date them. You need too many diseases, right? That's going to become more prevalent. Watch, in your lifetime, you'll know. You'll just be able to put it in there and you'll see a whole list of all the diseases you could potentially have. Now, does that mean you're actually going to get those? No. Because remember, I've talked to you about, there's something called, I don't have you learn this part, but I know you'll understand it. Penetrance and expressivity. Penetrance is how likely that gene is to express itself or not express itself. There's a situation where women walk around believing they are women and they have all the characteristics of women, but they're actually XY. And it's because their Y chromosome was masked and never expressed. So it's like they have Turner syndrome. And then expressivity is how it is expressed. So for some people, if they have webbing on their hand, some will only have a little tiny bit of webbing, if at all, and others will have full-on webbing of 3 or 4 fingers. So how it is expressed can vary. Just like if you know somebody who has Down syndrome, are all Down syndrome children the same? No, that's expressivity. Some are as mature as a 4-year-old, and some are as mature as an 11-year-old. There's different ways to have that expressed. My twins, it's always interesting on the PTC paper to test. So for some of my twins, it's like, gagging, and others it's like, oh, that's terrible, but not the same response. Not the same amount of widow's peak, right? So there is room for our metabolism of our bodies and how that might end up expressing it. We're going to talk about that, where environmental factors influence how we express a particular disease. Okay, so here, this is just showing you, here is Tay-Sachs disease, you're lacking an enzyme. Cystic fibrosis, we've already talked about cystic fibrosis before and the buildup you can have. And here's some gentlemen with cystic fibrosis. Okay, so now let's look at this autosomal dominant disorder. Now, person who is wearing the darkest shirt, take a look at this pedigree. Dark shirt, are you looking at this? Outermost shirt, outermost shirt. Okay? Look at this pedigree. Now look at this pedigree. Look at this. And now back to here. How is it, point out, how is it different? Go ahead, have that discussion.
If you go back to the other pedigree.
Here's a
The
recessive,
disease is recessive.
here's a dominant.
And the disease is dominant.
Two generations
Children are
That's why both parents are affected, and now
That's how the family's okay.
children with people who aren't affected.
Do dominant diseases skip generation?
No.
By skip, I mean I'm here, I'm not here, and I pop up again. That's skipping.
No.
No. Dominant diseases don't skip because you can't what them? You can't hide them. You either have them or you don't have them. You don't talk about being a carrier per se. Carrier is when it's hidden. Okay? You either have the disease or you don't have the disease. This daughter right here escaped the disease. She married somebody who didn't have the disease, and none of their offspring have the disease. Okay? But over here, this person had it, and even though their spouse didn't have it or their partner didn't have it, it still showed up in their children. How come it didn't show up in all their children? They're heterozygous. Yeah. Yeah. So, on your autosomal dominant disorders, affected children will usually have an affected parent. Now, by usually, again, I'm talking to you about like penetrance and expressivity, but most of the time they will have an affected parent. Number 2, heterozygotes are affected. Heterozygotes are affected. Okay, number 3, light-shirted one. Justify number 3 using this pedigree. 2, affected parents can produce an unaffected child. Support that claim. So these 2 affected parents had 2 unaffected children. Why? Because they were affected, but they were what? Heterozygous. Okay? Dark-shirted one, you explain claim number 4. 2 unaffected parents will not have affected children. Go ahead. Justify that one.
Because the tree is dominant, so it can't be passed on recessive.
Let's say
Some people don't have
there'll be
it.
homozygous
Is there any question marks down here for somebody?
All right? So the family here on the right, they're unaffected and they will continue to have unaffected children unless one of their children marries somebody who has that disease. Okay? What are some examples? Okay? One is neurofibromatosis. And this is when you have like a discoloration like in a patch. Sometimes they call them birthmarks. Okay? And when you have these, okay, you can say something about the parents. There was a family I knew, and after their baby boy was born, he had, a fairly large one right here on his cheek. And I said to them, I go, which one of you, I was talking to the parents, has that? And you're like, what? I go, I know one of you has a patch like that on your body. And the dad's like, it's totally me. I have one. It's right here behind my ear. Okay? And so that, like this, when it's on the face, they actually had to do surgery to get it removed because it can become tumorous later. And I will tell you, I had a student, bless her little heart, she had neurofibromatosis across half of her face. So you want to talk about, and what a sweetheart she was. You want to talk about the burdens we have, or we care what we look like, or something doesn't look good on that particular day on us and we feel bad about ourselves or whatever. She had it on half of her face, this line. And it was, sometimes it became darker, sometimes it was lighter, and it affected her eye, her vision, and the way it was in that pigment. So she had to go and get stuff done continually to her eye. So be grateful because that's a burden she can't get rid of. And like I said, they can become tumorous. Here's somebody who had it extensively. Thank you, Miss Lynn. That's so pretty. Okay. Yeah, so that one's pretty bad. All right. Another one is Huntington's disease. And in Huntington's disease, you don't even know you have it till you're usually in your 40s, unless you go and get tested for it, which you can. Okay? You don't know that you have it until your 40s, so you might already have had children, and it is a dominant disease, and you lose the ability to control your body. And what happens, you can't even sit in a chair because you can't hold yourself in that chair, and you'll just fall out of it. And so they end up putting you in a nursing home-like facility where you're tied down. And years ago, there was a court case. Did I tell you this story already? And there was a family, a mom, dad, and they had 3 boys. And the dad had Huntington's disease, and he was put in a nursing. And this is probably when the facilities weren't as good, so he's tied down. He can't, but your brain is perfectly fine. Just imagine that. Brain perfectly fine, but you can't control your body, so they have to tie you down so you don't fling out all over the place. And the boys said, when because they were already born, and in their teens or whatever when this came on, the boys said, "Mom, if we get that, you gotta take us out. You gotta kill us. You gotta do something. We are not gonna live like Dad did." 2 of the 3 boys got it, and they were in a facility. And when they got really bad, she walked in there with a shotgun that she had hidden, and she shot them both. Literally shot them. And she went to court, obviously, over it, and she was older, like she was, I want to say she was in her 60s or 65, and she's like, "I promised my boys I wasn't going to let them live that way." That was the only means she had. I might have picked something a little more subtle, okay? But those were the only means she had to do that. And people fall on both sides of this coin, where they will say that is absolutely wrong and that is murder. Maybe they should still be alive, And there are other people who say, put them out of their misery. And those are the things you have to start thinking about. Is that okay for her to take that in? End of life decisions, is that one of your additional objectives? I can tell you, remember how I told you my uncle was in the hospital and then he passed away? And he had said to his wife, my Aunt Winnie, that no, he did not want to be on any life support or anything like that. But when he first went into the hospital, right after he had the stroke, and he was still had kind of things somewhat together, he was telling her, "I don't want to die." So then she's faced with, what do we have legally? And now he's just told me, "I don't want to die." So they didn't know how much support to give him in order to make that, to make that decision. So those are things you want to think about. I had the conversations with my boys at the dinner table when this is all going around. I was curious, and my son said to me, my oldest son said to me, "Mom, if I don't have arms, okay, if I don't have arms and I'm in a major accident, you need to say, don't resuscitate him." And I'm all, "Son, not having arms, that's not like the end of the world. You still have your head, I'm sure they can." He's like, "Mom, listen to me. If I'm in a major accident and I don't have arms, do not have me resuscitated, because if you resuscitate me, I will just run out to traffic." Then my younger son, who's 19, he goes, "Mom, whatever you do, don't let them ever kill me." He goes, "Keep me alive. I don't care if I don't have arms or I don't have legs. They might figure something out." And my other son's like, "No, just no arms, that's it. I'm running into traffic." And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Okay, so good to know. So Huntington's disease, autosomal dominant, you don't know until you're older. Here is another dominant disease, achondroplasia. The most common form of dwarfism is an autosomal dominant disease. And if you have achondroplasia, is there a chance that you could have a normal height person?
No,
It's a dominant disease. Could you have a child that is not a dwarf?
Yes.
Yes, because you could be heterozygote for that, right? If achondroplasia, let's give it the letter A, okay? If she is big, if she is big A, little a, and he is big A, little a, then they could have a child that is what? Little a, and have normal height. In fact, this was a bioethical issue because there was a dwarf couple who they had their baby tested, and the people testing them thought, oh, they want to know if they're going to have a dwarf. If they're having a dwarf, they're going to abort, because they had said abortion is a possibility here. And they did abort because they were having a normal height child. And they didn't want to have a normal height child in their family of dwarfs. So again, and now that's a whole nother issue. We're going to talk about abortion, right? So I'm not bringing that up, but I'm saying people, you don't always know how people are going to come down on this side. And again, there is another set of practice problems for you to do on that. if you take a look, just off the bat, knowing what we know about autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, what would you say that disease could be? What?
Dominant.
Yeah, it looks like it's dominant. Why would you say it looks like it's dominant? Tell me. Yeah, it's not skipping any generations. It's showing up again and again. All right? Now, so we did that. Okay, so that is that part. The last section we're going to talk about right now is beyond simple Mendelian patterns. And I'm going to stop this and restart. Have a piece of toast.